Hello, hello, thanks for being here. Blink twice if you're in danger. You're not? Well, that notion is the premise for the newest thriller of 2024, Blink Twice, co-written and directed by Zoe Kravitz. It deals with class, trauma, power abuse, and is definitely up your alley if you enjoyed films like Get Out, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and Gone Girl. Blink Twice is a crime thriller and follows the story of a broke, unhappy cocktail waitress named Frida, and while working a huge fundraising gala, meets tech mogul Slater King, who later invites Frida and her best friend to vacation with him on his private island, and during their stay, people go missing. People get injuries that they can't remember, and it all gets very twisted, very sadistic, and very violent. For starters, I had a lot of fun watching Blink Twice, and although the plot became very predictable very fast, they managed to cover their asses with a few extra plot twists that added some zest to the film. Now, Blink Twice definitely wasn't praiseworthy, it wasn't high art, but it was an interesting take on the abuse of money and power, and it seems to be making a larger statement about men, and perhaps that forgetting their abuse and misdeeds only adds fuel to the fire, but that's not a topic I want to get into, so let's move forward. With Blink Twice, I would say the pacing was decent despite the drawn-out first act. The lead performances by Naomi, Ackie, and Channing Tatum were convincing, and despite all the perverted and graphic, eyes-wide-shut business going on, they managed to incorporate a lot of humor, especially postmodern humor about vaping, which unfortunately as a Gen Z appealed to me a lot. So I did find the vaping ordeal very, very funny. Obviously, I like the word very, that's probably a Gen Z thing too. And to sum up Blink Twice in a few words, I would say it's like if Elon Musk had his own Epstein's Island, so Musk's Island, which sounds so ugly. And I would give Kravitz's directorial debut a 6.5 out of 10 stars because while there are a ton of fun and interesting qualities about the film, especially since it gets scarier as events unfold, it definitely lacked a bit of originality, and a few of the plot twists within the last 10 minutes could have been delved into a bit further for sure. But as always, women getting revenge is the sweetest thing to me, so I am holding it on a bit of a pedestal regardless of its flaws. Now I'm going to do something I've never done before and explain the ending of the film. If you'd rather preserve the mystery for yourself, feel free to drop off here, and hello again for those of you who stayed. So we know that the guests, particularly the women, were all losing their memory of when the men were sexually abusing and tormenting them, but how was this happening? My assumption is that it was happening when pictures were taken of them on that black and yellow camera, but it could have also been a mixture of the photo taking as well as being drugged, since that is something Frida and the rest of the guests are peer pressured into time and time again. And they also have that psychologist on the island, so it could have been a mixture of all these three things. And we know that Frida had been on the island before, which were shown through flashbacks of her with red rabbits painted on her nails. And if you can remember, red rabbit is a phrase one of the caretakers kept saying to Frida throughout the film as a warning, which suggests that the caretaker also had some degree of her memory wiped as well. And what we can gather is that most people on the island also endured memory loss to a certain degree, since we find out later that Slater King himself, as well as his assistant Stacy, also endured memory loss. But to some people like Stacy, the memory loss seemed to be something they willingly endured. But because the memory loss is only temporary, eventually they get nosebleeds and all their memory comes flooding back until the cycle is repeated. Now, there's three big questions that were either left unanswered or were ambiguous in Blink Twice. The first question is, how come Frida vaguely remembered that chameleon from her first time on the island, but nothing else? The second question is, why did Slater King invite Frida back to the island and run the risk of her remembering everything? The third question is, who had been wiping Slater King's memory? To answer question 1, we see that when Frida was first on the island, she got badly hit on the head, but there's no explanation on why she remembers something as small as a chameleon and nothing else. My reasoning is that Frida's head injury probably intensified the memory loss mumbo jumbo, and they even could have used hypnosis to have her return to Slater King at some point in time when they suspected the memory loss would wear off. To answer question 2, Slater King does say to Frida that she's his best friend, so perhaps he could have invited her back on that basis alone, and because deep down he's really lonely. But it can also be because Frida is just an easy target. We see that she's relatively passive even without the memory loss, so it's plausible that Slater genuinely enjoyed her company as much as he enjoyed toying and manipulating her, and probably invited her back because it's all just a game to him. To answer question 3, we don't have any explanation as to who was wiping Slater King's memory and why, but we can assume it's either something he initially agreed to or something his security agreed to do on somebody else's behalf, such as Slater King's father. And my assumption behind this is based on Slater referencing that his sister has a deep hatred for their father, but he never remembered anything about his childhood up until age 10. So he can't relate to his sister's feelings, and he, loves his father. Let me know if you guys agree with these explanations and what your own thoughts were on Blink Twice. Towards the end, we see Frida taking advantage of Slater King and being announced as the new head of Slater's tech company, which implies that she may also continue the cycle of power abuse on the island, since we see her acting entirely different from before, and we have to remember that she got this position by presumably wiping Slater's memory, a position which does not belong to her, but that she's taken for her own, which is the very same thing that the men on the island were doing. That is everything. Gotta get those stretches in. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, I really appreciate it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!